Go ahead.
Our mission, Helping Parents Heal, is a nonprofit organization dedicated to assisting bereaved parents. Through support and resources offered, we aspire to help individuals become shining light parents, meaning a shift from a state of emotional heaviness to one of hopefulness and greater peace of mind. Helping Parents Heal goes a step beyond other groups by allowing the open discussion of spiritual experiences and afterlife evidence in a non-dogmatic way. Helping Parents Heal affiliate groups welcome everyone, regardless of religious or non-religious background, and encourage open dialogue. Attendance at all Helping Parents Heal meetings is voluntary. All discussions that take place at affiliate-led meetings are confidential. We hope that participants will learn from and share with each other. Zoom meetings run by leadership are not confidential. These meetings typically feature guest presenters and are posted on YouTube so that affiliate members worldwide can watch and benefit. Neither type of Helping Parents Heal meeting is designed to replace traditional therapy or spiritual counseling. Helping Parents Heal offers a wide variety of speakers, allowing parents to learn about many possible ways to heal. This includes presenters covering progressive topics such as afterlife evidence and connecting with our children who have passed. The views expressed by our guest speakers may or may not reflect the opinions of Helping Parents Heal leaders and members, so we ask that you take from their presentations whatever may benefit you personally. Welcome, everyone. We're so glad you could be with us this evening.
Thank you for being here. And we're just so excited to hear Dr. Rawlette speak. And I'm going to go ahead and read her bio for you so that you will know a little bit more about her. Sharon Hewitt Rawlette, PhD, is a philosopher and consciousness researcher who specializes in the study of synchronicity and evidence for life after death. She earned her PhD from NYU, New York University, in 2008. Studying under Thomas Nagel, and was Florence Levy Kay Fellow in ethics at Brandeis University before leaving academia for an independent writing career. She currently serves on the board of the Bigelow Institute for Consciousness Studies and is a supporting researcher for the International Center for Reincarnation Research. Her books include The Source and Significance of Coincidences and Beyond Death. Her website is sharonrawlette.com, and she's also the author of Psychology Today blog, Mysteries of Consciousness, BICS award-winning essay, Beyond Death, The Best Evidence for the Survival of Human Consciousness, The Source and Significance of Coincidences, a hard look at the astonishing evidence, The Feeling of Value, Moral Realism Grounded in Phenomenal Consciousness, and The Supreme Victory of the Heart, a memoir of love, loss, and synchronicity. And without further ado, please join me in welcoming Dr. Sharon Rawlette. Welcome, Dr. Sharon Rawlette.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Thank you for inviting me to share with all of you this evening. It's a real privilege to get to talk to you. And I hope that some of what I have to say will be helpful. And maybe some of it will be new to you too, or maybe it'll be, presented in a new way that strikes you in a new way and helps you. So, as Elizabeth said, there are two main topics that I focus on in my parapsychology research, and that is meaningful coincidence or synchronicity, which I use the terms interchangeably, coincidence or synchronicity, and also evidence for life after death. And there are a lot of overlaps between these two areas, as many of you have probably experienced. One huge category of meaningful coincidence is these synchronistic experiences that people have with their loved ones who have passed on. So that's something that I I have explored, that's really actually, so my book, The Source and Significance of Coincidence, that Elizabeth mentioned, is a really big book, but the biggest chapter in that book is about our synchronistic encounters with our loved ones on the other side. So this is a huge part of what I study when I study synchronicity and coincidence. So one of the things that I have noticed when I am interacting with people who've had these synchronistic experiences is that it's really easy to spend a lot of time analyzing them or doubting them or wondering, like, was that really my loved one? Or, am I just imagining something? Because the thing about coincidences is that they really are, they're on this border between ordinary experience and extraordinary experience. So there's always an ordinary way that you could explain what happened, right? There's nothing obviously paranormal happening there, but there's this weird way that events come together that seems significant, and it seems like it might be a message from those you've lost. And that's a really hard kind of ambiguity to deal with for a lot of people, because we like certainty about things. We like to know for sure where, is this a message from my loved one or is it not? Especially for a topic like this that's so important to us. I mean, these are the things that we care most about in the whole world, is the continuing existence of those that we love and how they're doing. And so to have this feeling of uncertainty and ambiguity is really difficult. I think that it can, at least what I've seen in some of my friends, for instance, some of my close friends that I've seen wrestle with this, is that sometimes this desire for certainty and proof about the origin of these experiences can interfere with our ability to appreciate them for what they are, and to truly receive the message that's coming from our loved ones, because we're so busy trying to silence our doubts about it that we can't just relax into the experience and into the communication. So the main message that I want to bring to you today is to realize that these coincidental experiences, that their purpose is not to prove anything to you. Their purpose is not to bring you certainty. That doesn't mean that there isn't, if not certainty, that there isn't at least very strong evidence for life after death. But you don't need to depend on any individual coincidence or synchronicity to bring you that evidence, because there's actually a whole wealth of evidence for life after death that you can explore, that you can bring with you into your coincidence experiences. And that, so when you are interacting through the synchronistic experience with your loved one, you don't have to worry about whether the afterlife really exists or whether your loved one really goes on, because you have this bedrock of all of this other evidence that carries you along and helps you to silence those doubts so that you can just be present in the experience. So I want to go through some of the major types of very evidential evidence that evidential evidence that there is for life after death. And in particular, what I want to focus on is not just all the types of evidence that there are, but the way that they interlock with each other and support each other. Because I think the real strength in the evidence for life after death comes from this the vastness of it, and the fact that it is so consistent and coherent when you look at it from all of these different angles and from all of these different phenomena. So I divide the evidence for life after death into two main groups, or two main types: third person evidence and first person evidence. So the third person evidence is the kind of thing we've been talking about when you have an interaction with someone who is on the other side and is communicating with you in some way, whether that's through a coincidence or synchronicity, which is honestly probably the most common form of after-death communication. But the next most common form would be dreams, which are not necessarily like your ordinary dreams. I'm sure many of you are familiar with these dreams. They're a little bit different. They're a little bit more vivid. They're often really full of light. And often the communication in them, whether it's through words or through feeling, is very clear in a way that our ordinary dreams isn't. So call them dreams because they happen at night, but there's something, they're like super dreams in a way. So dream communications, but then also these communications can happen through waking visions that you have of your loved ones. You actually might see your deceased loved one, or you might hear them. They're not necessarily visual. They might be auditory. They might be both. They might be coming through the sense of smell, or they might come through the sense of touch. Sometimes you can feel your loved one hugging you, or as Elizabeth experienced with her shared death experience with her son, actually feeling him, give her this amazing hug. And didn't you have the feeling that he was sort of like inside of, like hugging you from inside? Is that how you? Yeah.
Hugging from the inside. Yes.
Yeah. Yeah. So there's even more sort of senses that we can experience them through than what we can experience physical people through, I think. So there are all kinds of those sort of apparitional experiences. Then, of course, there's mediumship experiences where you are communicating with your loved one through an intermediary who maybe is more sensitive to that communication and is able to convey it to you. And there are physical manifestations. So our loved ones on the other side that can affect physical objects in some way, whether they are moving objects or sometimes breaking them, or sometimes hiding them from us and then making them reappear at an important moment, or sometimes they affect electrical phenomena. So there are all these sorts of physical things that they might do. And then a final category is one that you don't actually read about very much. It hasn't been well studied. This is the phenomenon of phone calls from the dead, quote unquote, where people actually have their phone ring, they pick it up, and they hear the voice of their loved one on the other side. Sometimes they only, say a few words. Sometimes you can have a full conversation. I have a couple of friends who both have had extended conversations with their loved ones, their deceased loved ones, over the telephone. So this is kind of an interesting phenomenon that's midway between the apparitional experiences and the physical mediumship, the physical phenomena, because it incorporates elements of both. So there you have lots of different kinds of third person evidence. But one of the issues when all you're considering is third person evidence is that there are still skeptical explanations for what's going on here. And one of the biggest that people worry about is that somehow it's just imagination or hallucination caused by wishful thinking. You really desperately miss this person, and so you have a dream about them, or you have a waking vision of them, but somehow it's just a hallucination because you so much wanted to see that person. It's important to realize that there are a lot of reasons that this is not a good explanation for these experiences. There are lots of different evidential aspects that these third-person experiences have that point to them not being products of wishful thinking. And one of the most important is that many of them bring new verifiable information. So, for instance, in the case of apparitions, it's about 10% of people who experience an apparition of their deceased loved one didn't actually know that the person had died when they experienced the apparition. So they didn't even know that they were close to death in most cases, or they were sick or in any danger of dying whatsoever. And they see the apparition of them usually coming, saying goodbye, or I love you, or, take care of yourself, this sort of farewell. And that's their first indication that that person is leaving the earth plane. So it can't be wishful thinking. It can't be the fact that they're just grieving so much that causes this experience, because they didn't even know that the person had passed on. But then there are also other kinds of verifiable information that come through these third-person experiences. So there are lots of different examples. I'm going to give you one from a guy named Robert Waggoner. Some of you may know him. He wrote a really great book on lucid dreaming, which I highly recommend. That's actually the title of the book, is Lucid Dreaming. And Robert Waggoner, sometime after his father died, he started having dreams that his father was taking him to his closet, the father's closet, and showing him a suit coat and saying that he needed to get something out of the pocket of the coat. And apparently this wasn't too long after his father had died, because Robert told me that he didn't really want to bother his mom about it, because she was grieving and there were just other things going on. So he didn't say anything about it for a while. But then he found out that his niece had also had a dream of his father asking her to get something out of the closet. And so when he realized that, he's like, okay, I need to figure out what's going on here. So he went to his dad's closet, and most of his clothes had actually already been given away to like the Goodwill or something, but there were 1 or 2 suits left. And so he went through the pockets and he found a whole stack of family photos that were really important to the family, and nobody knew where they had gone. And so he managed to save them from, possibly getting given away with those 2 remaining suits. So here's information that he had no way of knowing, that comes to him and to his niece. This is also a very evidential aspect of these experiences, is often they will come to more than one person at a time. And the people will experience them independently. So it's not like they told one person told the other person and that provoked the other person to have the experience, but they have them independently and they receive this new information. So these are reasons to think, no, there's a lot more than wishful thinking going on here. This is a lot more than imagination. But among parapsychologists, there's an understanding that most of us have some level of psychic ability. Psychic ability is something that everybody has to some degree, and it's especially active when we have strong need. When we're particularly emotional, we particularly want something. And so some parapsychologists say, well, if we all have some ability for ESP or for telepathy, it might be that these experiences that we're having, well, they are just our imagination, but somehow our psychic abilities have found this information that we didn't know in any normal way, and they've sort of used that information to create this very convincing simulation of our interaction with our loved one. It's a sort of it seems a little far-fetched as an explanation, but as a philosopher, I have to say I do appreciate the fact that that is possible, and I do think that it's something that you have to consider. But there are very strong reasons, again, to reject this hypothesis, which is usually called the super psi or living agent psi hypothesis, psi being psychic functioning. And the most important reason that explanation doesn't work is all of the first person evidence that we have for life after death. And this comes in a few different forms. One that, again, I don't hear a lot of people talk about, but I think is super important, is the first person testimony we have of people who are actually still living in physical bodies who have the experience of appearing to other people as apparitions. So they're still a living person in their body, but they have like an out-of-body experience where they experience themselves at some remote location, and a person at that other location sees them there as an apparition, just as they would see, you know, somebody who had passed on who was appearing to them. And sometimes they have a conversation, some kind of communication, and they can verify afterward that both of them experienced it the same way. They have the same memories of it. So, and this happens with dreams as well. You have living people who appear to other people in dreams. And what this shows is that the experience of interacting with another person and with that person's personality and consciousness through an apparition or through a dream, that it's not just imagination, because we have the testimony of people who were that apparition. They have experienced intentionally using that as a mode of communication. In fact, there was, back in the 1950s, there was this really careful study done by a guy named Hornell Hart and a few of his colleagues, and they systematically compared apparitions of living out-of-body experiencers and apparitions of people who had died, and they compared them on like 23 different traits, and they said, no, these phenomena are the same phenomenon. This is the same thing happening here. And so it doesn't make any sense to say, well, in the case of the apparitions of living people, there really is something to it. And in the case of people who've passed on, there isn't anything going on there. No, there really is a consciousness behind those apparitions and those dreams. Another important kind of first-person evidence, of course, is near-death experience. And I'm not going to go into a lot of the details because a lot of you will be very, very familiar with that. But I will just mention that one of the most important evidential aspects of near-death experiences is not only the fact that people, again, are able to perceive new verifiable information when they're in that near-death state, but also that people who, before they had their near-death experience, were incredibly, incredibly skeptical about the possibility of life after death, to where, I've said, I'm 100% certain that our consciousness stops when our body dies. After they have their near-death experience, they are like 99% of them are completely convinced that our consciousness does continue on because they had that firsthand experience. And so even those of us who, might be very skeptical because we haven't had those experiences, just hearing the testimony of people who were as skeptical as they could possibly be and yet had their minds completely changed by that experience, that should have an impact on our belief about life after death. All right, so now we get to my favorite piece of this. This is sort of the final piece. And it's a little bit involved, but I love talking about this. So far, we've got first-person experience of living people who appeared in apparitions or dreams. We've got near-death experiencers, but near-death experiencers, they weren't permanently dead, right? Their body wasn't permanently dead. They came back to it. And so there's some question, okay, well, maybe, consciousness, it continues for a little while, but once the body is really dead, then, that consciousness stops. So it's very important that we have an additional piece of evidence, which is the memories of people who have experienced death in a previous life, and that body was permanently dead, and yet their consciousness continued on. And they have memories not just of dying in that previous life, but they have memories of what happened afterward. They have memories of coming out of their previous body, sort of floating up, like near-death experiencers often describe. They have memories of observing events that were still happening, you know, around their body, or things that were happening to their loved ones after their death. They even have memories of having been apparitions or having come to their loved ones in dreams. There are various cases of this, but one of my favorites comes from some research done by Ian Stevenson. Many of you will be familiar with his research on children's memories of previous lives. One of the cases that Ian Stevenson investigated in what was then Burma and is now Myanmar involved a woman who had lost her husband, and after his death, she had a dream where he came to her and he told her that he had wrapped up some money. It was apparently a 5 chot note, which is not very much money, but he had wrapped it up in a white handkerchief, he said, and he had put it in a box of basket work, and she should go find it. So when she woke up from the dream, she apparently knew what box of basket work he was talking about, and she went there and she found the handkerchief and she found the 5 chot note in there. And she told Ian Stevenson that you know, it wasn't very much money. It wasn't like it, you know, changed her life or anything, but the important thing was that she felt like it was a sign that her husband was watching over her, that he still cared about her and was connecting to her in this way. What was even cooler is that sometime later, a child was born also there in Burma, a young boy, or he grew into a young boy. And when he, you know, got to be somewhere between probably the age of 2 and 5, that's when most of these children start talking about these memories. He started talking about having lived this other life. And he had several details about this person, this man that he used to be, that allowed Ian Stevenson to trace him to this woman's husband who had passed away. Well, what was even crazier is that this young boy remembered that he had appeared to his wife in a dream, and he remembered that he had told her about a 5 chot note that was wrapped in a white handkerchief. And the little boy wanted to know, did my wife remember the dream? Did she go and find the money? and of course, even Ian Stevenson was able to confirm that in fact she did remember that dream. So to say that that these are just our imagination is to ignore this obvious evidence that this is actually a communication from our loved ones, that they're trying to let us know that they're there. They're trying to help us in whatever ways that they can. And there are other sorts of experiences that people have from intermission memories as well, especially as they're moving towards a new life. They will have memories of, for instance, seeing the parents that they're going to have in their new life. They'll have memories, or even of choosing their parents, or having God or some spirit direct them to particular parents. And they will have sometimes memories of actually entering the body that they're going to have in their new life, of going into their mother's womb and taking up residence in that body. And what's really cool too is that all of these different kinds of what researchers call intermission memories match what near-death experiencers report as well. All of these different stages of that intermission period, there are near-death experiencers who have experienced the same thing. So even to the point of going into a new body, although they don't succeed. In the case of near-death experiencers, there are a few cases of this where they're sort of trying to get into the body of a newborn child, usually it is, but then they end up for some reason having to go back to their old body and reviving there. So there's this amazing aligning up of the testimonies from the near-death experiencers, the testimonies from people who remember that intermission period between lives, and all of those things line up then with our third-person experiences that we have with our loved ones who have passed on. So when you see this vast amount of evidence and how it all fits together, there isn't another way to explain it. This is the only rational way to respond to this evidence, is to say, well, no, consciousness does not stop when the body dies. That person still goes on and they're still able to communicate. And we have the evidence that we need to say that happens, and that's true. So taking that back to our everyday coincidental and synchronistic experiences, I think it gives us this very strong foundation that can allow us to quiet our skeptical, analytical minds, the ones that are worried about maybe we've somehow been fooled into thinking that our loved ones are still there when they're somehow not. No, we haven't been fooled. The evidence is there, and you can rest assured that it's been very, very carefully researched and analyzed. And you can investigate. There's always more to keep discovering. So when your analytical mind has those doubts, there are places to go and to fulfill that need for objective evidence, because it is a real need, and those are very important questions to ask, but there are answers to them. And then once our analytical mind has been satisfied in that way, then when we come to those moments where these coincidences happen, these things happen where we're wondering, oh, well, that seems like a sign from my child, from my spouse, from whoever it is that we're missing that's on the other side. That seems like it's them. That feels like them. We don't have to worry about whether that's possible. We know that it's possible. And so instead of worrying, you can stay in the moment, and instead of using your head to analyze what's happening, use your heart and be present, because I really think the purpose of those experiences that we have, of these synchronistic experiences, is not to bring us certainty about the existence of the afterlife. I mean, it may help us along that path, but those experiences aren't designed to do that job. We really need all of this other evidence to have a convincing case for that. But these experiences are designed to give you a very particular experience, a very personal experience of connecting with your individual loved one, and to be present with them, and to feel their love, and to send them your love. And when you can quiet that analytical mind and just be present in that moment, then you get the full value and the full beauty of those synchronistic experiences. So let me leave you with one final story. Okay. So this is one of these pre-birth memory stories. And it comes from some research done by Mary and Peter Harrison, and they talk about this in their book, The Children That Time Forgot. There was this woman living in England. I think it was maybe in the 70s or 80s, and she had one daughter, and then her second daughter she lost when her daughter was 5 months old, I think from a severe illness. And it was really devastating to her. She ended up divorcing from the child's father because they were just having so much difficulty dealing with their grief. And she ended up marrying another man and just kind of not even ever talking about that loss that she had because it was too hard for her. Well, years later, she had several children with her new husband. And the fourth child that she had with her new husband, when she got, I think she was 2 years old when she first started talking about it, this young girl started talking about memories having been her 5-month-old daughter who had died. And for instance, one day they were driving past the cemetery where her daughter was buried. And the little 2-year-old said, "Look, mommy, that's the place that you put me in the ground that time, and you almost fell on top of me." Well, it turned out that at the burial, the mother had been so distraught, and she was taking some medication to try to calm her down that was kind of disorienting her, that she had almost fallen into the grave on top of the coffin. And there was no way that her 2-year-old obviously could have known this. So sometime later, these memories that children have tend to, come out here and there. They'll just say, one thing on one day, and then, months later, they'll say something else. So at some other point, her daughter mentioned that she remembered that she had been buried with a silver bracelet and a fluffy yellow ball. Now, the mom did remember that she had buried her daughter with a silver bracelet, and she remembered that there had been a fluffy yellow ball that actually the girl's older sister had wanted to bury her with, but the mom had said, "No, don't put that in a coffin." So the mom went and talked to this older daughter and asked her, whatever happened with that yellow fluffy ball? And she said that she had actually sneaked it into the coffin when nobody had been looking. So the young girl's memory of having been buried with those two items was in fact correct. And there were a few other memories, but the most important thing for you to know is that when this girl was 6 years old, she asked her mom, "Do you remember the night that I died? There was a bright star in the sky." And her mom hadn't thought about it in forever, but she said, she did actually remember that the night that her daughter had died, she had gone to close the curtains, and she had noticed outside over the backyard, there was this strange looking star that was very bright and seemed to be hanging very low over the garden. She had actually mentioned it to somebody at the time because it was so odd. So she told her daughter, "Yeah, I do remember that." And her daughter said, "That was my star. That was my way of telling you that I would be back." So those signs and those synchronicities, there's somebody behind them. And maybe, well, not maybe, sooner or later, whether it's on this side or on the other side, one day we will be face to face with our loved ones again, and they'll be able to tell us, "Yeah, that was me."
That is amazing. Oh, I just loved every story, and everyone is saying so in the chat box as well. And one of the things that you were speaking about evoked a memory for Catherine. She said, "My son had past life memories of a life in Japan, liked sushi from 3 years old, knew a great deal about nets and fishing. We have no Japanese heritage." So is this something that you see quite frequently in terms of children growing up and maybe having skills that they could never have, or obviously tastes that they would never have acquired through their family?
It is. And actually, I think that having those strange skills or strange tastes is more common than having the clear memory of where you lived or even of having lived before. Like you carry over those sort of character traits or those abilities from the other lifetime, even if you don't remember having lived it. So somehow those things seem to come through more easily, I think, than the memories themselves.
That's so fascinating. Carol is saying, "With all of your amazing work, I would love to know where you are on a personal level in terms of believing in consciousness survival." So I would assume that you have a resounding yes for that.
Yes.
But
Yeah.
I would
No.
like to, on a personal level, again, we talked about this right before the meeting. How is it that you came to be interested in studying this, since you don't have anyone personally who has passed? that's very close to you. It would be really interesting to hear about that.
So I came to this study through synchronicities. I actually, at the time that I started experiencing them, I was an atheist. I didn't think that there was anything except this physical world. And I was going through a really difficult time of my life, not grieving somebody who had died, but grieving the end of a relationship. And these synchronistic experiences started to happen to me that seemed to be accompanying me on that journey and guiding me and comforting me along that way. And so I started asking questions about, well, I mean, this could be my imagination, but it seems to be having a very positive effect on me. In some cases, it seems to be bringing me information that I wouldn't know otherwise. So I really wanted to understand what that was. Was it possible that there was more to life than just this physical world? And so I just started reading really anything that I could find about that topic. And of course, there's so much literature out there about near-death experiences. And I discovered very early on Ian Stevenson's research into memories of previous lives. So that just opened a whole other world to me. And I think, the evidence for things like ESP, telepathy and clairvoyance and things like that, that's important. And it's definitely something that's not mainstream in our culture, but it doesn't go to the point of proving that there's a whole other way of existing, that consciousness is something so much more than our bodies, because you could explain psychic phenomena in still a sort of physicalist sense, like it's some sort of weird quantum entanglement or something like that. And so, but it was really reading the survival literature that helped me understand how much more than our bodies we are, and to take seriously all of the experiences of meaning that we have, like of the deep value of life and the deep value of relationships, that those things aren't illusions, that's actually the most real stuff that we can experience. So yeah.
Beautiful. Yes, our journey here on Earth is all about love, and that's what we always are talking about. And let's see, Deb has a question, and I'm kind of interested to find out what you think. This is about synchronicities, and she's asking if you have the opinion that the signs that we ask from our kids are coincidence. For example, she asked her daughter to show her a cardinal the other day, and one flew right in front of me. I guess what I would like to expand it to include is, does it have to do with the time-space continuum? And was that going to happen already? Was it our kids who had already decided that that was going to happen? Or how exactly do those signs happen? Have you studied that at all?
Yeah, that's actually one of my favorite topics. It's something that I am thinking about a lot right now, because that philosopher side of me is like wants to know how the theory works and like how the physics of it works, and like you said, the time space continuum. How does this all come together? So first, I'll just give sort of a general answer that I think that actually there are organizing principles in our universe. The directing principles of our universe act in a non-local, holistic way. So it's not like when you ask for the cardinal, then something then has to happen that then causes the cardinal to fly in front of you. That there's a wider perspective from which it may have been that the cardinal was going to fly there, and so you were prompted to ask for that, so that you would have this coincidence here. It might be that you asked, and then there was, the nearest cardinal in the vicinity, there was a way to sort of prompt that cardinal to fly in that particular direction. There are lots of different ways to explain it, but the most important thing, I think, is that our universe is designed to create those experiences of meaning and of connection. And so it's almost like the universe said, well, we need this meaningful moment. We need her to be able to connect with her child on the other side. And so we're gonna align everything in a sort of timeless way so that experience happens.
That's beautiful. And, one thing that I've heard is that our kids already know it's going to happen, and they plant that thought into our head because they've already seen ahead that we want to see a cardinal or whatever it is that we're wanting to see. And then the bird appears. So that was supposed to all along. But then there are other people that we work with who say that it's possible for our kids to kind of control birds and butterflies and have them almost and that the animals are actually excited to be able to kind of act like gliders and be controlled by this person who is doing this from the other side. So
yeah, I think it's very possible that animals are consciously participating at some level, that their soul is participating and feeling the presence of that other soul and conveying that through their actions. Absolutely.
Well, and that's wonderful. And it kind of is proven as well with our dogs and cats who know our kids, who are sitting looking out into space, and we're sure that they are looking at them, and then they'll yip and they'll say something, but out into space, and they're obviously connecting with someone that we are not connecting with at the same time.
Yeah.
Yes,
they definitely have a sensitivity on a different level that
they do.
Yeah, that we can't pick up.
It's amazing. Sabina is saying my kitchen light turned off and on twice in the last few minutes, getting validation real time, which is wonderful. Carol is saying, I love all the stories. Wow. And then Sue is asking, do you know of any studies on remote shared death experience? I have experienced this and I can't find much on that subject. Wonderful stories. That's kind of like what I experienced actually myself. But
well, really, this is an area of study that's just getting started. So I mean, Raymond Moody wrote his book on shared death experiences. I don't know, maybe it was 10 years ago at this point. And then William Peters came out with his lovely book about a year ago. So there's starting to be an awareness of them, but the study of them has not gotten to the point where, at least that I'm aware of, where anybody has really honed in on these remote experiences. Now, of course, to some extent, those experiences have been studied, I mean, even 100, 150 years ago, within the context of apparitions at the moment of death. So that probably falls under this label of a shared death experience, when the soul comes and sometimes actually is like acts out in some way, not acts out their death, but it is presenting themselves as dying, so that the person understands what's happening, so that they're able to share in the process that's happening, and then of course usually conveys this message of I love you and goodbye. So to that extent, I mean, people have been aware of that kind of thing for at least 150 years, but studying it as a specific topic, I don't think we've quite gotten there yet.
Wow, that's so interesting. I was wondering, we have a lot of parents who are in our group who have children who have learning disabilities, or who are kind of on a different level in terms of the way that they interact. And they have maybe a greater intelligence in many ways, especially for things that are things that are supernatural, things that are being able to communicate with loved ones in spirit. And for instance, I have a friend whose son passed, and his son is constantly in his bedroom playing with his dad. And so would you say that that's also something that is a sign that
Sorry, I didn't quite, I
so
didn't quite
this,
get what you're
this
saying.
grandson, her son passed. Her grandson is very frequently in his room. She'll hear him giggling and
Oh, in the room of the son who passed away.
well, in his
Or,
own room, but playing with his dad who has passed. So
oh, okay.
so
Gotcha.
I just was wondering if that's something that you have heard of, or if it's something I've heard of it many, many times actually.
Yes. Yeah. I mean, I think children in general tend to be more sensitive to that. You know, they're still at an age where they don't really know enough to think that that's not normal. So they just sort of accept that, yeah, that person's in my room and that's my friend, or, you know, that's my dad and he's still here and I'm, you know, playing with him and having a great time. And they don't, you know, it's so normal that they don't even think to mention it to anybody. So yeah, I think that's a very general thing that happens with children. But I do also think that for kids who are neurotypical in some way and they have, you know, other gifts, often sometimes that period of time where they are still sensitive to that other energy or the other wavelength, it gets extended in their life and they may carry those abilities, you know, decades into the future.
That's wonderful. I do have Lana who says that my little 16-month-old grandson looks past his mom who transitions picture and giggles and jabbers, which is just absolutely wonderful. And I think that I've also heard of parents saying that they have a camera on in the siblings' room, and the siblings just old enough to walk, and they'll be standing up and talking and laughing in their cribs, which is also just incredibly wonderful. And that ability kind of goes away with age in many cases, just because society tells us that that's not what we're supposed to be doing, talking to someone who's not physically there. So it's hard, I think, for children that way. Mary Beth is saying, what happens to the connection and communication when your lost loved one takes on a new physical life form? Do you have any research on that?
I'm trying to think. I feel like I have seen some cases like this, which suggested that there still was a like the ability to sort of communicate on a spiritual level, even though there was the soul was in a new body. I can't pull any specifics out right now, but I will just say that I think that all of us, you know, even while we're here in our physical bodies, there's a part of us that is on the other side at the same time, because our consciousness is much larger than what we're able to access on a daily basis. So there's that sort of higher self or that bigger self that we have. And so even if we do reincarnate into a new body, there's that part of us that always remains capable of communicating from that higher place. And I think you know, that's part of how we're able to communicate with others telepathically here, because there's that part of our soul that's able to connect with their soul on that completely different level. So it's not a barrier to communication just because you're in a physical body.
Thank
Or
you.
they're in a
That's
physical
exactly
body.
what I believe. And I think that all of us spend time with our kids on the other side when we're sleeping, and we might not remember it, but we are completely capable of doing so. And so sometimes you wake up and you just feel so great. And you might not have had a lucid dream, but there's just something about the evening, the night's sleep that was just so amazing. And
you feel like you've just been with the person. Like,
Yeah.
even if you can't remember specifics, like you just feel their presence, and like how, like I can't even miss them because I just saw them like a minute ago. And it's a delicious feeling. Yeah.
It's really wonderful. And I know exactly what you're talking about, because I do believe that a part of our soul always stays higher. Even when we do reincarnate, there's still a part of us that's over there. And in fact, I can't remember, but I think it was George Anderson, Irene, who said that when he was doing a reading for a parent who had transitioned, the parent said that when the parent went over to the other side, he realized that he had already been there spending time with his child all along. So I thought that was absolutely beautiful. I
Yeah,
mean,
that is.
so
Yeah.
this has just been so interesting, and we have maybe room for one more question. Let's see. Oh, Yelena is saying, my son was talking to his imaginary friend Serge when he was 2 to 6 years old. Do you suppose that this is someone from his past life? Lots of kids have imaginary friends, that's for sure. Do you suppose that a lot of these are people who we interacted with in past lives?
They certainly could be. I think they I think they're probably more likely, not necessarily people who are still, they're not people who are still alive in physical bodies from a past life, but they're people that we may have known from a past life who are still on the other side, who are present with us. Or even they may not be people from an immediate past life or any past life, but may also be just spiritual beings that we know from that time between lives, that we're interacting. They're just, our spiritual friends that are hanging out with us. So they could be either. Yeah.
That's very interesting. Maybe our spirit team who are there to guide us, right? Angela is asking a very good question. Do you find people get stronger communication with loved ones when they actively do something to facilitate it? Or are there certain types of people who get stronger signs and communications? Do you have any thoughts on that?
I do think that intentionally asking works. Because there's somebody listening. And so if you particularly want communication, it really helps to ask for it. And it really helps to ask for something specific, as we were already talking about people asking for a cardinal, or asking for a particular kind of sign, because it adds that element of evidentiality to it, where you can choose something very specific, and then when that thing shows up within the next day or two, that that's not chance, that really is a response to the question that you were asking. So absolutely, I've had one of my good friends from college who is she's been fairly skeptical about all of my research into these things. She decided to experiment and to ask her grandmother, who's passed on, for a specific sign. She asked her for a peach rose, and I think it was, I don't know, 2 or 3 days later, she was out crossing a bridge in the town where she lives, and there was somebody that had a bucket of roses there that said, take one of these for the person you love, or something. And there was a peach one there in the bucket for her. So she was like, she texted me right away. She was like, there might be something to this thing that you were talking about. So yeah. I think it really does facilitate those experiences.
Well, this has been wonderful, and we have time for some closing remarks. If you'd like to just say something to our parents, the research that you're doing is fascinating, And it's very exciting to have someone who is doing this type of research, who is able to talk to parents about this and to let us all know that the things that we're experiencing that we know are happening to us, that are they're things that we're not imagining. And I think that
No.
that's obviously, I
No.
don't believe that I'm imagining it, but I want for all of our parents to realize that this is something that is not only real, but that can get stronger and stronger
Yeah.
as we move forward.
Absolutely. There's so much corroboration for the things that you're experiencing. And yeah, you don't need to doubt it. Just enjoy it. Enjoy the communication. Like, just be there with your loved one and connect with them on that soul level. Yeah, but if you are interested in learning more about the evidence, the main things that I talked about today are things that are actually in my it's a little book called Beyond Death, because what I was really trying to do is just present the most important pieces of evidence and show how they connect to each other. So if you enjoy the stories that I was talking about today, there are many more in that book. There are those really evidential, like, eye-opening cases. So feel free to check those out.
Fascinating stories. So Beyond Death by Dr. Sharon Hewitt Rawlette, and so I'll definitely put that into the information underneath the YouTube video. And we're so grateful to have you here with us. We have everyone thanking you as well. Thank you so much. Love this session. Thank you so much for your research and sharing it with us. It means so much. Thank you. Very comforting and validating. So in any case, thank you for being with us. And we always ask all of our parents to unmute and say thank you and good night to you. So if you all would like to go ahead and start unmuting and saying goodbye.
Thank you.
Thank you so much, everybody.
Thank you.
Very much.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
So interesting.
Thank
This was
you.
fantastic.
you.
So
Thank
interesting.
you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
you.
Thank you. Bye-bye.